Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuitions. My classic album inspection today is Richie Kotzen's Fever Dream from 1990. So this is kind of like the last kind of Shrapnel album I really checked out. Probably, I think there was a Tony McAlpine that one after this, but this came out. I'm not sure when. Maybe it was summer 1990. There's no date for it. His previous album came out in August 1989, his debut album. So I'm kind of putting it out at this time. Thinking it's about a year after. So Richie Kotzen came to the attention of guitar players with his debut solo album. There was a flexi disc on Guitar Player, I think, was it Squeeze Play, and he did this thing where he did this muted arpeggio thing. Listening to his debut album, it shows like incredible chops, but the production's awful. It's one of the worst sounding Shrapnel albums. But full credit to Kotzen, I think he was only 18 when he did it, bastard. After that, I saw his instructional video, and I can't remember whether that came out before or after Fever Dream, but he certainly had the same guitar with his horror movie characters on it. But what was interesting about Fever Dream was he started doing his vocals, and I think this was a wise move. I think he sort of has recognised savvily, where things are going. And he's actually got a good voice. He does a really good, job of a fledgling vocal performance. There's actually a few of these guitar heroes later on tried doing vocals. Obviously, Paul Gilbert did. Tony McAlpine actually did a vocal album. Name escapes me. I think it's Madness, but he's actually got a good sort of AOR voice. But playing guitar and singing is no fun sometimes. But Richie Kotzen's made a really, really good job of it. He's got a great voice. So this album's it's only 37 minutes long. I think credit there, apart from a couple of tracks which are long. It's got short, snappy songs. I would describe it as a little bit funky, hard rock. I suppose something like James, a bit of James Gang influence, a bit of 70s sort of funk and soul kind of comes into it again, sort of fitting in with the funk metal thing that's going on, but more classic-y rock. It opens with She. This is kind of, it almost feels like a tapping or a kind of chicken pick riff. He's got a kind of, you realise it's quite interesting how deep his voice is. When you hear him speak, he's got kind of more of a high voice. I've always been suspicious that he's kind of affected more of a deeper tone. He's kind of trained himself to kind of have that more richer thing. When he goes for his lead break on this track, again, you're sort of shocked by how better the tone is. The debut album had a kind of scratchy, kind of thinner tone. It's really fat. I think he used Laney amps. And he does a lot of these sort of liquid legato and the tap slides. On this album, he's still bringing out his whammy bar. There's quite a bit of a sort of Vi influence. There's still a lot of arpeggios and that. He's still kind of finding his style. Then you got Fall of a Leader. I used to think this was the one that was used on Bill and Ted. Maybe it is, but I'm sure it's Dream of a New Day. Again, pretty solid track. None of these tracks, they don't jump out and go great, but they're solid. The lead work's solid. He's constructed good songs, good arrangements, and they're good. The third track, Off the Rails, this is sort of that typical thing where he does the Van Halen boogie. A lot of bands do this at the time. And a lot of guitarists feel obliged to do it. I imagine Greg Howe's done it. Jason Becker kind of had to do a Roth boogie for the Little Ain't Enough album. Cool sort of riffing, but it's just a bit kind of lame. It's only 2 minutes 44, so it doesn't outstay its welcome. Then you got my favourite track on the album, Yvonne. Quite interesting naming. A lot of songs you get named after a women's or girl's name, and Yvonne's quite an interesting one. It's 3 minutes 9, but it's got quite a pumping riff and quite cool power chords that kind of respond to his vocal. Then we've got Things Remember Never Die. Obviously, I'm looking over at the titles here. So what's interesting about this is a kind of blues track. Again, at this time, the shred sort of era does tend sometimes have their take on 12-bar blues things. I think Bruce Boulier does a 12-bar blues kind of sequence in his solo spot on the Racer X Live album. I think Jason Becker's Perpetual Burn has a kind of blues section. So what's interesting when the shredders do blues, it's kind of boom, dun, 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 And typically when they do the solos, they'll do fast pentatonics and they'll get in kind of epic dominant seventh arpeggios that they'll play over the dominant seventh changes. And the other interesting thing about this is Mike Varney takes a solo. This is the first time we'd heard. No, it's not the first time we'd heard Mike Varney solo. He solos on the How To album, which I think's '89, the High Gear album. But on this, was this before? Don't quote me. Anyway, Mike Varney's great on this. Yeah, Mike Varney's a good lead player. What he does, he plays a nice pocket. He's got a nice sort of take on the blues on this. Like Richie does the kind of typical shredding thing that I mentioned. Yeah, this track's kind of fun, but it's kind of like, it is just a blues. And then there's that thing where it feels a bit inauthentic because Richie Kotzen's like singing the blues, but he's like 19. You know, you maybe need to have lived more. I don't know what the vinyl arrangement was on this. Unusually, my mate got a cassette copy of this. Obviously, it's back in the day when quite a lot of us still bought cassettes. I didn't. I used to buy vinyl and tape it back at my mum and dad's. But Dream of a New Day is the next track. So this was on the Bill and Ted soundtrack for Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, I think, which came out the next year. Yeah, this is a good track. It's kind of things picking up again, catchy chorus. And then the next two tracks, Money Pound Roller Coaster, have that kind of funky James Gang funk rock thing. They're quite similar, pretty catchy. So pretty decent. And then you've got Wheels Can Fly. This is a kind of 16th note. So I find this quite refreshing. It's a driving song. This has got some unison bass and guitar lines again. This is a sort of popular thing. I think She opens with one of those. There's a few of those. It's kind of like the Vi Sheehan thing. Sort of by this point, it's starting to get a bit tired when people go, the guitar follows it to me. But I do quite like this track. And then you've got Truth and Lies, the last track. It's probably the most mature track on the album. It's a slow ballad with a nice minor 7 vibe. It's got a really cool kind of opening. It seems to be overlaid with some tap harmonics or something, or pick harmonics, not sure. His vocals kind of come straight in early, pretty cool. Like the groove on this. He does a really cool outro solo. I think this is the track that kind of shows where he can head, really. So, yeah, I mean, I've got some negativity about this album, but I do think it was a good sort of attempt at the time by Richie Kotzen to go, look, I'm going to sing my own songs. I'm going to put in like amazing guitar playing. The soloing's really strong. He really just, you know, his tone's better. He grows a bit on this. And for the most part, I think he pulls enough. You know, She, Follow the Leader, Yvonne, Dream of a New Day, Wheels Can Fly, Truth and Lies, maybe Money Power Roller Coaster. There's enough tracks on this to go, yeah, you know, this is definitely worth checking out. It's definitely part of that cycle of a good and better Shrapnel albums. Production's okay. The guitar sounds better, but the drums are still kind of a bit boxy. I'm quoting myself there. On the you know, it's that's kind of sample snare. It's at Marner on the drums on this. I forget who the Drace player is. I'm just going to look. It's Danny Thompson. I guess maybe he's a friend of Richie Kotzen's. After this, he'd do another solo album, Electric Joy. He would join Poison and do their Native Tongue album, which apparently is pretty cool. He kind of became a gun for hire. Then went to Mr. Big when Paul Gilbert left, and then he just did his solo album. Obviously, solo career we know him from Winery Dogs. Yeah, it's 35 years old this year, so if you've not heard it, I think it's worth checking out. I've got to confess I don't really know much Richie Kotzen stuff after this. He's a player I always admired, but there was other players at the time. I think at this point there was a kind of a bit of a Steve Vai thing with the whammies and you know, a few kind of octavey fifth things when that was coming to play, and he kind of got that out of his playing later on, I think. And obviously plays with his fingers now. But yeah, check it out. Richie Kotzen, Fever Dream, probably one of the last Shrapnel releases to stick out. I think this came out after the Michael Lee Ferkins debut. Joe Tofola's Infra Blue the year after this. Now hear this How To, you know, moving into different times. Okay, remember, share and subscribe. I'll see you again soon, and thanks very much for checking this out.